So I came up with a headline of testosterone-rich cocks hold key to effective weight loss.
Hey podcast listener, you're about to discover insider tips, tricks, and secrets to making more sales and converting more prospects into customers with email marketing. For more information about the Email Marketing Podcast or the Autoresponder Guy, go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. G'day, it's John McIntyre here, the Autoresponder Guy, and it's time for episode 28 of the Email Marketing Podcast, where we talk about the top tips, tricks, and secrets for making more sales and growing your revenue with email marketing. Today, I'll be talking to Dan Page, an absolute pro when it comes to writing headlines, which is pretty cool because David Ogilvy, the famous advertising legend, said that on the average, 5 times as many people read the headline as read the body copy. When you have written your headline, you spend 80 cents out of your dollar. Now, this is a very key thing that you have to understand when you're writing sales letters, when you're writing emails, any sort of advertisements, anytime you want to get someone's attention, the first thing that comes is one of the most important things that you write. And today, you're going to discover how to write head-snapping headlines. Now, tell me, what did you think when I said head-snapping headlines? Right? A head snapping to attention, kind of like you call your friend by their name in a really loud, angry voice, and they're going to turn around. Their head's going to snap towards you. Right? So you've seen that image, and that's a good headline. That's a head-snapping headline because it makes you look. You're like, whoa, I want to know how to write head-snapping headlines. So today you're going to find out how to create more of those headlines, which means your sales pages, emails, all of those things are going to improve. Dan's even going to share his step-by-step process for not just creating headlines, but learning to write great headlines as well, head-snapping headlines. Now, to get the show notes for this episode of the Email Marketing Podcast, go to dropdeadcopy.com/EP28. Now, there's no reviews today. I have a listener question, but if you would like to leave the review, you would be doing me a big favor. So you can go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. Leave a review. There is a link there to go to iTunes. Leave the review. I'll read out your review on the show and even read out your link if you drop a link in the review too. Now, we have a listener question from Mandy Ellefson. Here it is.
Hi, John. This is Mandy Ellefson. I love your content. I have a question about autoresponders and how many things you can sell during one autoresponder sequence. I have 2 different things that it would make sense to sell, and I'm wondering if it makes sense to offer both of those at different times during my autoresponder sequence, or if it's just going to be overwhelming. Thanks so much, and I look forward to hearing a response back.
Okay, so Mandy's question was, how many things can you sell in an autoresponder sequence? She has 2 products, and she's asking, should I only sell one product, or can I sell both? Is it going to be more confusing if I try and sell both? She has 2 products. The first product is, by the sound of it, it's a product that's less coaching. It's on how to have more time and how to scale your business. And then the other product is very similar, but it sounds like there's more coaching. So they're very similar products with, one with a bigger focus on coaching and one with more focus on the product. Okay, now here's what I think. Because they're both similar products, you can promote them both in the same autoresponder because the autoresponder is really getting a certain type of attention. You're getting people's attention for, how to have more time in their business, how to scale their business, that type of thing. Okay, now, however, you want to be crystal clear on what the difference is between both products. So there are a couple of different ways you can do this. The first way is you can promote a different product every few emails. So for example, if you're doing daily emails, which I highly recommend, let's say one week you would promote the first product, and the next week you would promote the other product. Another way of doing it would be you would just promote the first product, which I'm assuming is the cheaper product. Right? And you would have people pay via PayPal or however it works. And then afterwards, you would offer them an upgrade to the better product, which is more coaching. So you would just use it as an upsell. And then there's no confusion about where they are in the funnel. I really like that idea. Another way to do it is, the third way, is to create a landing page with your products, which explains the difference. Kind of says almost like a products page or a services page, which basically says what each product is, so it goes through the first one. Then it says, but if you really want to go to town on this and scale your business and have more time, you can get product number 2. And here's the difference. Here's what else you get on top of what you get with product 1. Right? So I like option 2 or 3. So every email would just promote the same thing, but you would still be hitting people with both angles. All you got to do in the emails then is sell your prospect, sell your subscriber on the benefits of working with you. All right, the product is beside the point. The product doesn't particularly matter. Okay, they're there for a result, a benefit from you, and all they need to know is that they're going to get that benefit, which isn't the product. The product is just the delivery method. All they have to be convinced is that they're going to get the benefit from you, and they're going to click that buy now button. So that's it. I hope that helps, Mandy. Now let's go get into this interview with Dan Page and find out how to write head-snapping, I love saying that, head-snapping headlines.
It's John McIntyre here, the autoresponder guy. I'm here with Dan Page, a terrific marketer. He's actually a headline pro because him and his team have tested over 3,000 headlines and email subject lines. Dan's also a well-known publicity expert. He's taught over 1,100 people on how to generate publicity for their businesses. And he's also a business development or business consultant expert, which he'll talk more about in just a moment. And in this interview, we're going to talk about how to write head-snapping headlines by finding the golden nugget of the story and working it into your pitch. So, Dan, how are you going today?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on here, John.
Good to have you on here, man. We're just talking. It's 6 a.m. over there. I really appreciate you getting on here, man. It's early.
Not a problem. I love it.
Cool, man. Now, before we get into the specific headline stuff, give us a quick background on kind of how you got into marketing, headlines, publicity, and what you really do for yourself at the moment.
Certainly. Well, I'm what's called a corporate business development specialist. So what does that mean? I'm basically the hired gun for my career over the last 30 years or so that is brought in typically by very large companies to help launch new products, drive new sales, fix broken sales processes. And in that realm, I've sold over $500 million worth of stuff throughout my career. And so one of the tools that I use is learning how to get the attention of my audience. So my audience could be a corporate CEO. It could be, thousands of consumers. It could be the media, journalists, radio station hosts. And whatever my audience is, I'm always focusing how to get their attention. So hence it comes back to the first words that come out of your mouth or off the keyboard, and that's ultimately your headline. So I'm a huge fan.
One thing I wanted to bring up right as we get into the headline stuff is David Ogilvy, you probably know this one, the famous advertising legend, once said, this is a quote, on the average, 5 times as many people read the headline as read the body copy. So when you've written your headline, you spent 80 cents out of your dollar. So what this kind of effectively means is that when someone's sitting down to write an email or write a sales letter, they should be spending maybe 80% of their time on writing that headline or coming up with compelling headlines, because that's really one of the most important things, if not the most important thing in the whole marketing push there. What do you think about that?
I agree. In fact, one of the things that I learned to do many years ago when I first studied Dan Kennedy, I'm sure you're familiar with Dan.
Yep.
And is I learned just to train myself just to watch the headlines in the world around me. Dan has this famous thing where he talks about going to the grocery store and just standing in the supermarket line, and you see all the tabloids. And I'll go to the supermarket, and I still do this years later. And rather than going to the shortest line, I'll pick the longest line, and I'll grab all the tabloids and just run through them and see what kind of headlines grab my attention. Or even, and I love looking at all the spams that come into my inbox, much as I hate spam. And all of a sudden I said, why does that spam grab my attention? What was that subject line that got my attention? So over time, I've just trained myself just to watch for the headlines in my life, whether they're on a billboard, or they're in my inbox, or they're on, on the supermarket aisle. And it becomes just kind of a hobby after a while.
Okay, so what you're saying is like when you practice it like that and you keep seeing good headline after good headline after good headline, you really get a kind of an intuitive feel for what makes a good headline.
Yes, absolutely. And really deeper than that, John, I think it's seeing what the good story is. And I think, and I can give you some examples of that, but just developing a nose for a good story. And then the headlines just present themselves to you if you have that sense of what a good story might be.
Okay, so it starts with a story, and then where you find the headline out of that, which I think we'll get into that in a minute. So headlines are pretty important then.
Absolutely, and it goes both directions. It's not like it always starts with a story. Sometimes, okay. And my wife is a professional writer, and as part of that, she's written over 3,000 articles. So she and I on a regular basis are just constantly talking about headlines because she publishes blogs. We actually even teach a course on how to blog for a living. And her blogs come out every Tuesdays and Fridays. Every Monday and Thursday, we're going through 11 different headlines. Which one's the best one and why, for our audience. So it just becomes ingrained in your head. and it becomes just fun and quite often funny, looking for those fun headlines in your life.
You're saying when you write a blog post or when your wife writes a blog post, you'll sit down and you'll actually spend the time to write 5 or 10 headlines and then go through them one by one and really try and, knuckle down and figure out which one is going to be the best one for that audience. It's worth you're saying it's worth putting a lot of time into.
Absolutely. And as you just talked about with David Ogilvy, not only is it worth putting your time into, but everything revolves around it. That's why I was talking about, the sales and the business development that I do. The first words out of my mouth makes all the difference in the world, whether that very busy CEO is going to listen to what I have to say. Right. That subject line that goes out in my newsletter is going to make all the difference between a 2% open rate and a 20% open rate. Right. It's that first impression you have on that other person makes the difference between failure and success. So
this is applicable to any time you need to get someone's attention. Could be a billboard, could be an email, could be a sales letter. Anytime you walk into a bar and you're trying to meet someone, it could work there as well.
That's absolutely correct. Yes.
All right, man. Well, let's get into. I'm sure you've got a list of, or maybe off the top of your head, of what are some of the best headlines that you've seen around.
One of the ones that I have done. We have a lot of fun with, and part of it is just divining that story, like you divine looking for water, in the earth, just divining that story or that headline from what's within, either your own business or in my case, a client's business. And I'll give you just a few examples, very simple ones. I was working with a client recently that had published a book, and she'd written a book on how to cook with roosters. It's like, well, okay. And she wanted to get some press out of it. And she's a nutritionist and she's a weight loss expert. And she wrote this book about roosters and how roosters are really, they're, from a Chinese medicinal perspective, are really good for your health and how they can help you lose weight. And I'm looking at that. Okay, that's kind of boring, but, let's see if we can find that golden nugget you and I were talking about. Well, and rooster, as you probably know, here in the U.S. around the world, is also known as a cock. And a rooster is a cock hen. So actually, you got it. So,
I see where you're going with this.
So we're actually out. In this case, I looked at that and said, "Oh, your audience here," because we're talking publicity. She wanted to get publicity. Said, "Your audience is really those shock jock radio hosts. That's who's going to love this." So I came up with a headline of "Testosterone-Rich Cocks Hold Key to Effective Weight Loss." For the press release, and put it out there on the airways. And within moments, with less than 10 minutes from pushing the button, we were getting responses, emails, and phone calls. So they absolutely just loved it because it's controversial. It grabs your headline. As a word is supposed to be a swear word, but it wasn't really.
So she was very happy with that in the end, despite the controversy.
Absolutely. And the controversy, and we can talk about that in a little bit about how to create the headlines, was the reason why we went for that headline. We were looking for that controversy. Okay. I have another fellow, coincidentally, who wrote a book. He's a well-named author, Larry Ostrovsky. He has a company he has a website where he teaches, nutrition and how to be able to eat right and live a healthy life. And he was wanting some press. And he said, "Guys, we were just talking." So it's that interview process we were going through and just sort of digging and just being open and listening for the story that might be in there. And he was saying, "Gosh, Dan, sometimes, some of these health foods that people think are health foods really are terrible for you." And on the flip side, I said, "Gosh," he said, "a lot of junk foods have nutrition in them." He said, "Even beer has nutrition in it." And I said, "Oh, stop right there." He said, "How about, is beer an undiscovered health food?" And put that out there, and boom, literally within 10 minutes, we were getting phone calls of people wanting to interview him. Because it's that controversy we created with that, beer and undiscovered health food.
So it sounds like you have a certain knack for this. I suppose after just that comes with experience. When you keep finding these hooks, that's really what they are, the hook in the story. So if I was to do it, or someone else who wasn't so experienced with this, they would sit down. It might take them a little bit longer, but if they do it for long enough, and they just, rather than just say like trying to brainstorm headlines off the top of their head, if they sit down and really kind of drill down into what they're trying to write about, sooner or later they're going to find something that'll just catch their attention. It'll stand out like a golden nugget.
Absolutely. And so it's looking for that golden nugget. Maybe it's kind of a segue to talking to the how part a little bit, because it all combines together.
Sure.
Looking for that story that's going to trigger your emotions. That's ultimately what I do, is either I'm looking for controversy, I'm looking for juxtaposition, two things next to each other that don't make sense, like beer and health food. or it might be looking for that anger, what really pisses you off, or what makes you jealous, or what generates hope in your life. What almost brings you to a tear when you're reading the story, or what makes you laugh, what's funny, what's incredulous. But just looking for that, when I'm looking for a story or a headline, I'm looking for the emotions that it can generate. And then underneath that is the headline just waiting to be found. And it is there waiting to be found. You just need to poke around a little bit until it presents itself.
This really is simple. You take whatever you're trying to sell, or like you're trying to sell the idea here. If it's not a product, you're selling the article to people. So what someone should do is sit down and really put a lot of energy and time into kind of thinking, reading through the article and trying to find what's making them angry, jealous, what's making them hopeful, what's bringing them to a tear. And that's kind of step one. And then step two is when you find that, find a way to put that hook that makes people angry, like the testosterone full, rich cocks, or the nutritious beer. Find a way to put that into the headline, and then that's done. So it's like step one, find the hook, and then step two, write the headline. It's pretty simple.
Yes, but from a clearly left brain perspective, absolutely. For a lot of folks, don't find it that simple coming out of the gate, and I think quite often the headline is the easiest part. But you can have a great headline and a lousy story, and you'll get the opens. Just look at some of the headlines on like Yahoo and MSN and Google. You click on it and say, "Oh, great headline," and you realize there's no story there. They were just trying to get me to click.
Right.
There are some folks that really put a lot of attention only into the headlines. So
is that a big problem? Or?
For a lot of folks, you see a lot of complaints on there if you look at comments on there. But I understand it. I understand why they're doing it, because it's all about driving traffic and hence driving clicks and links and advertisements. So I think it's kind of a slimy thing, but it's not necessarily black or white, John. It's not necessarily, from my experience, only looking for the headline. It's not necessarily only looking for that great story. Sometimes one comes first, sometimes the other comes first. But ultimately, my personal bent is there needs to be substance in a story behind what it is that you're saying in order to grab the attention.
So they kind of go hand in hand. There's a bit of a dance going on. You have the story and you have the headline, and vice versa.
Yeah, so so I don't want to say only do this or only do that. I'm just saying if you can train yourself to look and back up a little bit, look at who your audience is. And in my case, it might be a corporate CEO, or if you're a writer, it's going to be your ultimate reader. And what are they looking for? What do they really want in their lives? And how can I deliver it for them? How can you deliver it for them? And that backs itself into the story and the headline. And I can give you another example that's not controversial whatsoever.
Okay.
Of just having a sense of what story is going to touch us. In this case, it's a story of hope and yearning. It was about a year and a half ago. I was off on a mountain bike ride here where I live in Boulder, Colorado. It was the middle of February, and it was 11 degrees out, and the snow, and I love riding in the snow. It's cold, it's frigid, it makes you feel alive. And I was off on this ride, and I was going under a bridge on this bike trail way outside of town, and I saw this homeless fellow there with his dog, and it was freezing out. And he was there, and he had a bicycle with a trailer behind it, and he was just coming out from a bridge. He was, living under this bridge. And I stopped about 100 feet before him, and I got out $5. And I rode up to him and said, "Gosh, cold day, could you use $5?" And he stopped and he looked at me and he goes, "Yes, I could." He goes, "Maybe I'll get some food for hope." And I said, "Well, okay." Didn't even think about it. And I gave him the $5, and he started to tell me his story about how he'd been working full time and he'd been hurt. He was working up for what they call flood mitigation up in the mountains, fire mitigation, and he was hurt. He injured his back, and he lost his apartment. He lost his place to live because he didn't have the money to pay for it, and he ended up homeless. He said, "And I could live in a shelter. I could go to a shelter, and I could get out of this cold weather, but I'd have to give up hope." And I looked at it and said, "Oh, hope is the dog." I didn't get that at first. And I looked at that, and I just felt myself overwhelmed with emotion at this fellow's story, that he is choosing to live under a bridge in the freezing winter because he didn't want to give up his dog, and his dog's name is Hope. He didn't want to give up hope. I was like, oh my God, that's that's sad and it's beautiful at the same time. And so I came home, and after I went to the grocery store, I was on my way to get dinner for the family, and I came back and I brought him some food, and I got to know this fellow, and I came home and I just wrote down the story because it affected me so much, with no intention of doing anything with it. But that idea of just knowing a good story when you see it, it's like, oh, I'm not going to give up hope. That's so good, you know? And then a month or two later, I just got I do a lot of publicity. I do a heck of a lot of publicity for my business and my clients' businesses. And so I put this in the form of a press release, and I wrote it down, and the title of the press release, because I live in Boulder, Colorado, and the title of the press release was "Homeless with Dog, Boulder Man Refuses Shelter." And homeless with dog, Boulder Man. And my intent here was to get picked up by a big animal site. I want the story to get picked up by other animal lovers. So I put it out there, and by the next morning, I was number one on Google News and Google and Yahoo and Bing for Homeless with Dog, and within 12 hours. And then a big animal site did pick the story up, and it took on a life of its own. All the folks that subscribe to that site, that are on their feed, picked it up, and we had over 20,000 Facebook likes for the story, and people were so affected by it that they actually started a fund and raised over $5,000. And I wasn't even asking for money. I was just sharing the story when it touched people's hearts. So this isn't anger or controversy. It's just touching someone's heart. They started a fund, funneled the money through me. I went out, got him out from under the bridge, and told him what had happened. He literally burst into tears when I told him this story. And he got him out, got an apartment, and he got a full-time job, and that was a little over a year ago. And he's now working full-time with health insurance, has a nice apartment and a home for his dog. His life completely changed, all because of a headline.
So did you turn that whole story into another, article for a different kind of, like I say, a marketing website?
I didn't, because, I talk about it sometimes when I'm explaining to people how to be able to find a good headline and where to send a story. But really, there was no intent other than to just share a beautiful story out there. And part of it is just having an eye and a sense for when you see a story and just listening to yourself. In this case, I could feel tears well up in my eyes. Then I knew I had a winner. So if you feel anger, if you feel love, and you feel hope, and you feel jealousy, you feel those things, that's when you know you have a story. That's when you know you have something that's going to grab the emotional triggers of your audience. And I just saw it, and it took action on it. Is the only difference. One
thing I think is really interesting here is that it's very hard to do this, to write a headline or a story that triggers these emotions if you don't know your audience. So what people really need to be doing here is before they go looking for stories or trying to come up with headlines, they need to go and find out from their customers and their prospects exactly what pisses them off, what makes them angry, what keeps them up at night, what inspires them, and all these different things, right? So then when they come and sit down and go, all right, I'm going to write a headline, they can say, well, I know that, Joe Blow, my avatar over here, hates this, and he loves this, and he feels a bit doubtful about this. And then it's like you have all these potential angles with your story, and then you can start to come up. It might be much easier to come up with headlines and, email subject lines and stories after that as well, right?
I completely agree. Yes. One of the things that we do, and I look at my audience, is on two things. It's what they say and what they do. And so when I have the ability to, I will ask my audience questions flat out. Ask your audience, send them a survey. Literally, you can use free tools like SurveyMonkey, and there are others out there. Right. And ask them, what are the things that you're challenged with? What are you really trying to accomplish with your business or whatever it might be that they're doing? What's important to you? And ask them. And they will tell you. They will openly tell you. Some folks will. And you can make the extrapolation that other people are going to think like them. And then the other thing to do, which I found even more important when you have the opportunity to do so, is listen to what they say, but also watch what they do. Watch what they do. So that means, where are they going? What articles are they commenting on? What are the questions are they asking? What are the problems they're having? They're telling you that they can't solve. And to your point, what really pisses them off? What gets them excited? What makes them hopeful? And just watch what they do with their actions, because quite often that will speak much louder than what they tell you that they're interested in.
So you're saying that the best way to figure out what people are pissed off about, what gets them riled up, what gets them, inspired, those kind of things, is it's kind of hard to find that out accurately just by asking them. You really have to see what are they doing. Or you could kind of set up almost like scenarios for them to kind of act out, set up some actions and just see what they start responding to. Send them out, figure out like 5 different angles you could have and send them out to your list if you have one, and then see which ones are getting the most clicks. And then you start to get an idea for what really does piss them off.
That's exactly right. And most people wouldn't think that way, but if you don't have the ability to do that coming out of the gate, you can absolutely start by asking and have all sorts of fodder just by going there. And then that generates a next step because you're putting something in front of them. Then you'll see what they respond to. For example, like my wife, as it says, a professional blogger, and that's where those thousands of headlines, just tested headlines, come from that we do on a regular basis. And in her case, she writes in the multi-housing industry. Sounds really boring. Things like tenants and landlords issues that come up. But she's been doing this long enough now and has watched what people click on, what they comment on, when they actually click through to the rest of the story. Right. That, without a doubt, which stories are going to be winners and which ones aren't. And we talked about those 11 headlines earlier in the interview. But that is not 11 headlines in one subject. She has 11 stories a week that she's actually putting out there, which is a lot. And so we'll sit down and we'll know, beyond the shadow of a doubt, which one's going to pull the best. We know which keywords people are going to respond to. We know which types of subjects really, push their buttons. And we know which ones are yawners, that they might be the 3rd or 4th article down because, they're not as exciting. Right. And you just have to learn your audience after a while. But even if you don't know your audience, if you understand how to be able to recognize emotions and trigger emotions, then it still gives you a huge head start.
So if anyone's listening to this and they've been jumping around from niche to niche to niche online, they really should stay in the same damn niche, because once they do that for a while, they're going to get a really good grasp on what the hell, what works for their market.
Well, especially coming out of the gate, yes, it absolutely helps to either stay in the niche or know something about your niche. But in my wife's case, when she first started writing for, the multi-housing industry, she didn't know squat about it. She'd never been a landlord. She didn't know anything. So we started off by exactly what you and I are talking about. We started off by asking questions and getting responses from people, getting responses from our client, about what he thought they might be interested in. And then from there, I just started watching what people did based on what we put out there. And you start learning that over time. And if you do that long enough, then we get back to the point that you were talking about, is you just get a nose for it. You can't help it. You become trained to do it. Just sort of subtly trained to do it. You get a nose for the types of things that that people are going to respond to. Like in the case with the man who didn't want to give up hope. It was like, I don't know anything about the animal lovers industry, but I knew that was going to be a winner of a story. And I don't know anything about nutrition, but I knew beer and undiscovered health food was going to sell.
Of course. Okay.
Yeah, but you just get to learn. You got a very good intuitive sense after a while of what people are going to respond to.
We're to wrap up in a couple of minutes. One last thing I wanted to just ask you quick. When you try and teach this to people, are there any common problems or objections that people come up with and why they can't do it, or common challenges that they're telling you? And are there ways to kind of get around that?
Yeah, I mean, I get that questions like this in different faces all the time, that people look at this story and at their business. In this case, I counsel small business people, and they'll say, there's nothing exciting about my business. And a lot of businesses, there aren't. I'm also a firm believer that you can create excitement in just about anything. All you have to do is just look at how you can do that. And I can teach us through another example, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So I had a student that came to me and said, Dan, I have an art store. I sell art. And it was coming towards the holidays. He goes, and I want to be able to get people to come in and look at my art. I said, okay, that sounds pretty boring. How do you get a story out there in the newsway about people coming to look into your art studio to look at art? It's not something it's easy just to reach out there and create a story about, a man giving up hope, Yeah. So I said, okay, let's look at, in this case, about maybe an event. I said, how about we actually create an event that gives people a reason to come there? So you're not just saying, I have the Chicago Art Gallery, come to my art and look at my stuff. That's boring. What if you would create an event and I said you did a competition, for example, and you invited all these local painters to come in, and maybe you get something for them to paint. Maybe they can paint a portrait. And say, how about if somebody took their clothes off? and they come in and you put that person there naked in the back of the Erotica with little curtains around them, and music wafting through, and little finger foods and glasses of wine, and people can come in. You might have 5 artists, standing around there painting this individual, and at the end of that night of painting, people get to choose which painting they like the best, and maybe you can reach out and have people in your community, like the local newspaper owner or a radio show host, and they can come in and they can be one of the judges. And then you can judge which painting might actually be the best. And how about if you then auction those off so that the revenue generated from that goes to local nonprofits. And if that's the case, then you're going to have nonprofits going out there and telling all their supporters to come to this, this wine tasting event, and this, for all these artists painting, and they'll end up coming, and within a matter of like 10 minutes, we come up with this entire story, this entire huge event, all for to say, what's going to be of interest to people? Oh, naked, somebody with no clothes on might be of interest. And we actually just took something boring and then just turned it upside down, turned it sideways. What can I do to create an event? What can I do to create controversy? What can I do to create hope? And just look at those core human emotions, and then look what you have in front of you that you're trying to generate that headline or story for, and put the two together. And if they don't fit, that's even better, because you have that juxtaposition then that's going to get people's head to snap, as we were saying, and say, what? And just try to lead with that there's a story. That's one of the frustrations people have. They don't think they have a story, and all you have to do is play with it. Sit back, have a glass of wine if or just laugh with friends, or try to get angry like some of your customers are angry, and just look for those emotions, and you can play with it. You can come up with a story for just about anything.
That's wonderful. Okay, I think that's a great place to end. Before we go though, Dan, give yourself a plug. Tell people where they can find you if they want to learn more about you and what you do, and then we'll say goodbye.
Well, a couple of things. If you have questions for me, you can send them to info@skillhighway.com. And also, if you'd like to learn more about some of the stuff we do with publicity and how we generate publicity, I have a little product called Search Engine Caffeine, www.searchenginecaffeine.com. And that's just a process that I use showing how to be able to get online press releases out there and get listed on the top of Google within 24 hours. So either of those ways is a good way to get in touch with me.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I'll have links to both of those things, so your email address and the Search Engine Caffeine, down at the show notes at dropdeadcopy.com. Thanks again for your time, Dan.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Have a great day.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you want to discover more insider tips, tricks, and secrets about driving sales with email marketing, sign up for daily email tips from the Autoresponder Guy. Go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast, sign up, confirm your email address, and I'll send you daily emails on how to improve your email marketing and make more sales via email. You'll find out why open rates don't matter, and the 7-letter word that underlies all effective marketing, and much more.
The editing and production of this podcast were provided by Authority Engine. Learn more at authorityengine.com.